Tech censorship is the war on meritocracy. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I want to propose a scenario. What if you were somebody that had a job at a tech company due to your qualifications, a job which you learned that you were about to lose fair and square? Maybe your company was laying off all sorts of people, or maybe it was entirely getting rid of the division that you worked for, and thus you could collect unemployment and look at new prospects. This probably wouldn't be a huge deal to you, as you had a background in coding, project development, software testing, or whatever else actually got you the job. You probably made a comfortable enough living that surviving on unemployment for a few months would almost be a pleasant break, and you'd trust that it wouldn't be hard to find a new job soon enough. Perhaps a better job. Now, imagine a somewhat similar, but also completely contrasting scenario. What if you were working at a tech company despite the fact that you were completely underqualified? Maybe at best, you were somebody who was semi-qualified but willing to swallow their pride and play by a bunch of arbitrary social justice rules in order to climb the corporate ladder during a time when the more talented workers had a hard time doing such things due to their logic and principles. At worst, you are a full-blown intersectional feminist neo-Marxist ideologue that only got the job in the first place based on identity politics and a non-occupationally helpful degree from an expensive university that you didn't even deserve to get into, but again, you got into based on your immutable traits. Both of these latter mentioned people, especially the second type, would be rather nervous if somebody were to tell them, "Hey, so you remember all of those icky and gross white and Asian guys who were smarter and more qualified than you, that were super condescending all of the time to the women and underrepresented minorities at the company, to the point where we ended up firing them? Well, they want their jobs back, and some of the people at upper management are considering hiring them again." Clearly, this would pose an existential threat to not just that one particular job, but probably to your entire career, due to the fact that you never deserved that job to begin with. And if employers were starting to hire based on merit again, if you lost that one specific job, you'd probably never be able to find another one again. More so, regarding the type of person who is hired almost purely because of their identity, do you think that these people are paid particularly well, or that they are capable of negotiating a salary to push themselves out of student loan debt in a few years? Of course they weren't. These people are probably in around $100,000 worth of debt, and this is the most lucrative position they could ever imagine obtaining. So what do? Are they just going to roll over and allow fairness to come back into fashion and face career ruin and a personal financial crisis that they've never imagined in their worst nightmares? Or are these people going to fight tooth and nail with every dirty trick available so that they can attempt to cheat their way out of losing their jobs and careers? Well, the latter option, I do believe, is the actual state of Silicon Valley right now. You see, as a man in my mid-30s who has literally been immersed in tech culture my entire life, as my father was a computer scientist and I grew up in Seattle in the 1980s and 1990s, the more deeply I think about this, the more I am starting to be absolutely convinced that there has to be a civil war starting to be fought in the shadows of every tech mecca. The battle lines are fairly simple. It will be between the undeserving ideological affirmative action hires and diversity HR types, such as the woman at Apple who became famous for taking an entire month off of work because somebody posted, "Hide your kids, hide your wife" in a company chat. And those people will be fighting against the types of people who are starting the Free Thought Union at Facebook. As it stands now, the free-thinking workers are forced to be cloak and dagger about everything, due to the fact that the high-level people in each company has essentially been bought off by the Democrats, who gave these companies billions of dollars worth of tax breaks, creating the illusion that we have another tech boom, when we really just had a few companies that were favored by the Obama administration. However, it's not like the workers don't know something is up. As I explained in my video about my understanding of San Francisco social media worker culture, the most important thing to keep in mind about these people is that, as tempting as it would be to believe from the outside, these people are by no means ideologically uniform entirely, and the qualified workers probably largely hate the social justice business practices of their companies. But they dare not say so. Why? Because there's an entire fleet of authoritarian HR types sitting on diversity councils, trust and safety teams, or in high levels of management. And those people are the intersectional feminist ideologues that probably have useless degrees from universities they didn't even deserve to get into, and they were almost certainly only hired in the first place to appease the Democratic Party, who in turn turned a blind eye as these companies dodged billions of dollars in taxes. These companies hired the diversity team to make the Democrats happy. That was the trade-off. And now, these companies don't know how to get rid of them. I mean, let's be honest. Where exactly did that $30 million investment that Patreon got to become one of the favored companies in Silicon Valley actually come from, if not from people who had direct ties to the Democratic Party? I.e., his name is Joshua Kushner, who, despite the fact that his brother is the Trump administration's Jared Kushner, Joshua Kushner is a big old Democrat, and their parents were too, until 2016, when they stopped donating to the Democratic Party. You see, for all the blathering on that people say, like, Facebook is a private company, it can do what it wants, even though that's technically untrue, as it's actually a public company ever since 2012, or when people say, these companies can run themselves however they want, and they've decided that they don't support hate speech. Well, in spite of those types of sentiments being thrown around, what people should always keep in mind is that these companies are heavily monitored by agents of the Democratic Party that they shoehorned in to work at HR after giving these people a degree from UC Berkeley or something which they didn't even deserve to get into. And these people control how these companies function. They have a lot of power from within the company, and the company probably doesn't want to give these people all that much power, but they don't know how to get rid of them. Now, does it need to be that way? Not necessarily, but there are enough people in positions of authority who can fire people who cross them, so it will be very hard to change things. And if you're underestimating the mentality of social justice, HR, and diversity councils, let's look at how it became this way. And it's honestly very simple. 3 words. Affirmative action Obama.
Now here's where it gets really interesting and why I have absolutely no faith in the Republican Party except for a few brave people. The Pigford was supposed to be over, and Barack Obama gets confronted by the scam artist that runs the Black Farmers, the National Black Farmers Association, and he says that there are 72,500 late filers that we need to be brought in. And they say, look, there are only 18,000 black farmers in the country. This thing was supposed to be over. If you ever been in a lawsuit and you paid $100,000 and you said, okay, bye, and the judge says it's over, what Barack Obama did was open the case up again. He was the sole sponsor. He was the sole sponsor when the corrupt guy that runs the Black Farmers Association, who fakes that he's a doctor and who's getting paid under the table by the class action attorneys who are making hundreds of millions of dollars off of this. The people who got screwed originally, you know how I said there were 157 black farmers? They lost their farms. Their case got hijacked by the Congressional Black Caucus and the class action attorneys. And I started calling up the original people, and they said, we've been trying to tell the Republicans this for years. We've been trying to tell CNN and Fox News and everyone else for years that our legitimate case was hijacked. We lost our properties. The farmers that I know, like Jimmy Dismuke and Abraham Carpenter and Eddie Slaughter and Lucius Abrams, lost their farms and now have money being taken out of their Social Security checks. But they look around them and their neighbors who work at Best Buy and who are mechanics or police officers or even work for the USDA, who were the discriminators in this case, they got $50,000 checks, okay? It's probably 99% fraud, and we even went into the churches where they were teaching people how to defraud the government and caught them on tape teaching people how they could get their $50,000 check. We caught them dead to rights, okay? And you go to Washington, D.C., and you say, we caught them. We have affidavits from an FBI investigation that was diverted from the Justice Department because, oh, we don't want to touch on race in this country. Wait a sec, this is 99% fraud, and the actual black farmers want to go testify about how they got screwed over. You'd be helping the salt of the earth. Black farmers who wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go to bed at 9 o'clock, but instead it's been hijacked by trial lawyers that fuel the Democratic Party. The Congressional Black Caucus knows about this, and it was all done so that the Congressional Black Caucus and Democrats could win the black vote in the rural South. And we have the letter why Barack Obama, who had no history of sponsoring anything, was the sole sponsor of Pigford, was because, according to a letter that we have, he was told, if you sign on to Pigford, we can win the rural black South for you. And that's exactly what happened. You remember when Bill Clinton lost it, when Hillary lost in South Carolina? It was because Barack Obama had jiu-jitsued the Clintons, who had invested so much time trying to be the first African-American presidency. And he absolutely undermined it, and they've wielded the United States Treasury in order to pay billions upon billions of dollars, $2.7 billion so far, and right now, because we exposed it and nobody would do anything about it except for Congressman King and Michelle Bachmann, they're the only ones that will go out there and stick their necks out there. And Congressman King just put up a resolution this week, or last week, in which he said, let's stop the funding of this and let's investigate it. And Darrell Issa voted against it, okay? I've lost my faith in the Republican Party, and what we were told by Congressman King is they know it's fraud, but they're all afraid of being called racist. That's what they were told. They're afraid of being racist. And
as you just heard from the late Andrew Breitbart, the free handouts given to people based on their identities came directly from the top during the Obama years and at the highest levels of government. Despite the fact that everybody knew that this was corrupt, unfair, and downright diabolical, nobody said anything about it because the climate of fear around being called racist was just that strong. It's at this moment when you have to wonder, just how many corrupt practices went on based around privileging minorities and women with compensatory benefits during the Obama years that they didn't deserve in any way, shape, or form? I mean, it was just a week or two ago that we learned about a school in Louisiana that was essentially cheating college entrance requirements so that more black students could get into Ivy League universities. How many similar things happened on Obama's watch, yet were never exposed because people were afraid of being called racist? I mean, at Google, they were doing similar things, and when the extremely qualified James Damore ended up blowing the whistle, he was subsequently fired and blacklisted.
So, Harmeet, in this complaint, you have example after example of Google targeting people on the basis of their race and their sex. My impression was that was illegal. Is it?
It is illegal. It's illegal under federal law. It's illegal under California law. And what a lot of lawyers even around the country don't understand, that under California law, we have a unique labor code provision that makes it illegal to discriminate against somebody on the basis of their political activities or their political views.
Surely there were all sorts of workers thinking, Je suis James Damore. Because, honestly, things weren't always this way, and I don't think it's outlandish to think that there are probably people trying to figure out how they can both save themselves and the companies that they work for by trying to ensure they employ people based on qualifications and not ideologies or their identities. They want to ensure that people are treated fairly as opposed to being treated intersectionally. Being that I grew up in Seattle during the Microsoft boom of the 1990s, went to university in New York City, and lived in San Francisco during the Obama years, I can assure you of something that I believe with all of my heart. Prior to Obama, in the United States left, diversity was always something that we theoretically wanted and thought was cool, but ultimately was never more of a priority than substance and abilities. What I mean is that there were few female coders around, and they were particularly intelligent ladies and tended to get along well with the male geeks. I also can think of literally only one black guy I knew in the 1990s who worked at Microsoft, and he was particularly unique and almost a bit crazy in the fun sort of way, and continues to this day to have a strong distaste for black people who blame their shortcomings on white people, probably because such people always hated him for acting too white. Sure, the female coders and that one black guy got a lot of social attention when we'd hang out at parties, because it was the left after all, and everybody wanted to be friends with the cool female coders, the cool black coder, and even guys like me, the young, interesting gay guy who mostly hung out with 20-somethings when I was 17. But at the end of the day, if somebody showed up and called all of the straight white male geeks bigots, nobody would have had any tolerance for that person. And then all of that changed, not immediately when Obama came into office, but I have isolated it down to an exact year, which was 2012. The year Obama legalized the usage of propaganda on the American people, and Trayvon Martin's slaying prompted an aggressive and irrational black identitarian movement in the United States, which became global thanks to the internet, and clearly this relentless identitarianism made its way into the corporate world, and remember, it all had a feminist backbone, because Black Lives Matter was a feminist thing from the get-go. Furthermore, there's something very important to keep in mind about Black Lives Matter, which is that it was a distinctly San Francisco Bay Area driven movement, as the founders were from Oakland, which is about 20 or 30 minutes from San Francisco. And even before Trayvon Martin, there was Oscar Grant, who was slain unjustly on video by an officer in an Oakland subway station. That was the proto-Black Lives Matter incident if you really paid attention. It's almost as if this movement was designed from the beginning to socially manipulate Silicon Valley. Regardless, by 2012, if you look into the numbers around the economy, it became more than painfully evident that Obama took an already crashing economy and lit it ablaze with jet fuel, as if he actually wanted America to fail as a capitalistic superpower. But of course, he was also supposed to keep the Democrats in power, so he, being a affirmative action hire himself, decided to push identitarianism as a racist-ass distraction, which is undoubtedly why propaganda was legalized, and then places like MTV began making everybody paranoid about microaggressions all day, every day. Honestly, it was the most ridiculously foolish strategy that anybody could have ever utilized, which goes to show just how completely incompetent the Obama administration truly was, because it absolutely wasn't difficult for the citizens of the English-speaking world to decimate the race-baiting, illogical feminist nonsense that was being pushed upon us from the corporate world. So, by the end of 2015, it became pretty clear. The Democrats were going to face a reckoning for all of their lies, corruption, and economic incompetence. And of course, they've already started to. But, as I explained at the beginning of this video, the people who they hired to push this intersectional ideology into the tech and social media world are not going to give up without a fight till the bitter end, because they literally have no other options as individuals because they are not qualified in their fields. These are people who were promised a vague dream of some sort of Marxist-ish compensation for the fact that they weren't particularly prosperous or even talented, even though Marxism never works economically, and everybody's known that since no later than the 1950s. So when Obama failed our economy by embracing many of these principles, he gave favors to underqualified people in return for their loyalty. And the Democrats will keep granting favors until none of their soldiers work at these companies, because they have a codependent relationship with each other, so their loyalty will die very hard. That's precisely why these people block everybody on social media and encourage everybody else to do so. They know perfectly well that they can't ever win a single argument, and that they've lost literally every political argument they've gotten into for about 4 years straight. But they are pathologically committed to engaging in these arguments at least a little bit, throwing stones safely from a distance at people they've already blocked, because it's what their entire sense of self-esteem and often their careers are built upon. These people that smugly tell you, "You just don't understand intersectionality and it's not my job to educate you," right before they block you, weren't actually talented or even above average intelligence growing up, which must have really sucked for them, and I guess they must have always figured it was unfair somehow that they weren't ever really very smart, even though meritocracy is the closest thing to fairness that we're ever going to get, so you just have to get used to it if you aren't very smart, I guess. So then, when Obama came around and changed the rules to rig the game in favor of his obedient little intersectionals, these people finally rejoiced. They figured that finally things were fair, because they got a chance to finally win. And they not only got used to it, but they are terrified of having things go back to the way that they used to be, so they'll do whatever they can to postpone that happening, including lie, cheat, and essentially steal. Because, honestly, the truth is, when you're dealing with people who are in positions of power that they never deserve to get, they will abuse that power worse than anybody else, because they're not even smart enough to know what's going to eventually happen to them when they lose their power, and they acted so poorly. Censorship, of course, is their most useful weapon. That's why these people cheer when they get people deplatformed, while intelligent and logical people never do any such thing. We want to have the debates because we know that we can handle them, which is why, personally, I was actually almost sad when Kat Black took numerous months off making videos, because her twisted understanding of logic was illuminating to me in terms of studying the minds of deeply entitled, hateful, and completely dishonest intersectional feminists. That's also why I would still like to have a respectful discussion or debate with ContraPoints. But I know Contra will never do it because this person is so terrified of me that they had to lie about my intention for propositioning the discussion entirely, hoping to make it look like I had wanted to talk about their gender, which is clearly a convenient dodge, hoping to never have to actually deal with my real criticisms. Because, of course, I really didn't care about Contra's gender when I first reached out to them. You see, unfortunately for everybody, it's not the logical and talented YouTubers who have been given privileged status within the company. It was Cat Black who once bragged about having semi-regular meetings with the YouTube board, and now ContraPoints who is elevated. Not because they ever say much of anything coherent, but because they peddled the correct ideology. And the same probably goes for the way that these companies deal with most of their workers. And don't be confused, YouTubers are workers. Truthfully, it'll go on like this for as long as these companies are full of these types of people in positions of authority. There is a war on meritocracy, and these people will fight until they don't have jobs. Yes, these people have grown arrogant and drunk with their own power, but there's a very simple reason for that. Authority and power is the only thing they have to offer, because at the end of the day, they certainly don't have skills. So when these companies continue to crash and burn, or there's finally an internet bill of rights, well,
I assure you, brother, the sun will shine on us again.
ultimately, these companies were never as successful during the Obama years as it looked like they were to people. They were merely given privileged status in our government by not having to pay proper taxes, which helped tank the rest of the economy and set these companies up for financial disaster as soon as the Democrats were out of power. It was like the Democrats tried to stitch up open heart surgery with Band-Aids. And the Band-Aids have finally come undone. At this point, the question is simple. Will the qualified tech workers or business people of any type get their crap together to start running our economy properly? Or will the United States sink altogether? I guess only time will tell. But one thing has to go. Rewarding people more for not pulling their weight than they are rewarded for pulling their weight has to have no place in America. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please help me out on PayPal so I can buy a Christmas gift or two. And hit that bell button so you don't miss a video. Thanks for watching.